Ville Husso shines as the youngsters in Detroit take down some veterans in Pittsburgh. We will talk about that and more all today on Locked On Red Wings.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Red Wings. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Wednesday, October 2nd, 2024. Thank you so much for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen. Every single day, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome in, everybody. Happy Wednesday to all. We got a win to talk about. Always good when the Wings win. We talked a little bit yesterday, still without Brian, obviously, as you can see. I think he'll be gone today and then probably tomorrow's show and then back before the end of the week. So for all of you who, like me, who are missing our fearless, bald, beautiful brother, was trying to think of something else that started with a B there. He'll be back in a couple of shows here, but stuck with me again. I apologize for that. I truly am. But we do have a win to talk about. Like we said yesterday, I don't really care about wins and losses in preseason. Not something that I really look at or look for. But there's a lot of fight in this game, and at the end of the day, a win is always better than a loss. I'm never going to be mad at a win, even if it is just in the preseason. So this was a 2-1 victory over Pittsburgh. They played Pittsburgh 2 nights in a row due to the weird split squad scheduling nonsense thing that happened over the weekend. And then on, inevitably Monday and Tuesday night. So this was roster decision wise, this was a pretty interesting matchup because it was a lot of the higher end, big name players on Pittsburgh, not all of them, but a lot of them, Crosby, Malkin, etc., that played in this game for Pittsburgh, and the Wings didn't throw out any of their, I shouldn't say any. Justin Hall played. Like, they didn't play. I'm not trying to compare Justin Hall to Sidney Crosby. That sounds really weird out of context. You get what I'm saying, though. This is the Wings did not throw out any of, I can't even believe the first example that came into my head was Justin Hall. Tyler Mott was in this game, also not Sidney Crosby. Not a lot of the NHL roster played in this game, but they did have a couple. Like I said, they did have a couple. And the most notable player that is probably a lock to make the NHL team that played in this game was Husso. Ville Husso was fantastic in this hockey game, goes 43 for 44 in save opportunities. He looked great, and he had a couple of individual really good saves, a couple plays that Pittsburgh really did. I mean, they played tic-tac-toe a couple times, and he still stopped it, tracked the puck really well. They mentioned on the broadcast, which was on Bally. Thank goodness. So much better to have now that the Tigers are getting nationally televised games. You can go check out the postseason recap over at Locked On Tigers. But now that we're finally into we're close to getting fully televised Red Wings hockey again, it's always good. We just have the best broadcast booth in my opinion in the entire sport. So it's always good when we can get Ken and Mickey on the mic there. But Mick had mentioned that his positioning was really good, and I agreed. I think the biggest thing that I take out of Husso appearances is a very big picture thought that I have anytime he's out on the ice, and especially when he does well. And it's just the outlook of this team's goaltending situation changes so dramatically if he shows out this year, right? And I'm not asking for a Vezina, right? But I think it is so night and day different. Obviously caliber, but just how different the strategy and again, just the outlook really is the word of this team is if Ville Husso is what he was in the first, 2 months in his Red Wings tenure. Not only just because it gives you a really good goalie, which is the captain obvious part of this conversation that I'm sure many of you are already thinking, but also just with like roster flexibility. We've talked about it so much. This team has 3 goalies right now. I don't think they would hold on to 3 goalies the entire year if Husso was healthy and crushing it. I think that would give them a little bit more flexibility with Lyon, or if Talbot's struggling because he's not exactly a spring chick anymore, right? Getting up there in years. Like I think it would just give them so much more flexibility, and they can have a somewhat normal roster, right? This 12-8 and 3 nonsense that I can't even believe is still a thing this deep into the preseason and this close to the regular season coming around. So I think it is so, more than anybody else, more than Lyon, more than Talbot, like more than anybody. If Husso is really good, the entire conversation around the goalie room changes, and the entire outlook, obviously, then by the transitive property there of this team changes. So I'm so invested in every Husso appearance because I think his performance matters more than, I don't want to say like more than anybody else on the whole roster, but I think it is pretty darn close, legitimately. Like that's how much of an X factor I think he is for, the outlook of this season. I also thought it was worth noting that he did play the entire game. They did not split this. He did the entire game, faced all 44 shots, only allowed the one, and the one that he did allow wasn't even really on him. That was a complete defensive breakdown. Really good passing by Pittsburgh as well. So yeah, I was impressed, as we all were, I'm sure, by this performance. But it's one preseason game. I'm not saying that is going to happen. I'm not saying that he is going to just like take over and be great. I think the season started tomorrow, they'd probably still carry 3 goalies, and I think they will probably still carry 3 goalies on opening night. But I do think that if he actually becomes the 1A goalie that we all thought he was going to be, or at least that Brian and I thought he was going to be when we acquired him, that the entire outlook of this team changes. So he matters a lot, is really the point that I'm trying to drive home there. If we look at game flow, I guess, Brian and I, if we're doing the what do we call it? Difference maker, Billy Husso, very clearly the difference maker in this hockey game. For going game flow, the start of the game was a little bit slow for the Wings, and they obviously won, but they never really had a ton of momentum going their way in terms of just like tilt on the ice. Like they never really had a consistent amount of offensive opportunities. They were kind of playing on their back heels a lot. I mean, the shot totals by the end, I mean, goodness, at 40, they had about double. Pittsburgh had about double the shots that the Wings ended with. But at the end of the day, goals is all that matters. But I think that is obviously worth noting. And it started with the first period. They really got their teeth kicked in early. And that was the tone was set. And again, they recovered great. But I think one of the biggest things they struggled with early was there was a lot of penalties. And this was, as I said at the beginning of the show, a largely AHL roster. So like I'm not freaking out over the fact that they had quite a few penalties there in the first period and a half, first half an hour of this game. But I will say, with the opportunity then to play on the kill, I thought the penalty kill played really well. I thought that they looked pretty sharp. And this was a Penguins power play that was an atrocity last year, right? An absolutely atrocious unit, which is so wild because for so long it's been so good, and it still has a lot of really dynamic big names on it. But as they get up there in years, and as the depth of the Penguins starts wearing thinner and thinner, that power play was really bad last season. I think it was legitimately one of the worst in hockey, like bottom 3 or 4 in the entire NHL. So they did well against, albeit a presumably poor power play. But, we continue to drive home the point of Tyler Mott. And as we get into some individuals, we'll start with him right after this. Got to talk to y'all today about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They have a lot of great other features as well. You have all-in pricing where you can toggle this feature and then get your entire total up front. So there's no surprise or hidden fees or extra, tax or anything at checkout. They have seat views, so you can see pictures of your seat before you buy. And obviously, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back tomorrow. I'm pretty sure we'll be back tomorrow. The Wings have an off day. I'll be really busy with Tigers playoff stuff yet again. So we'll see. That kind of a 50-50 right now. If we aren't back tomorrow, then Brian and I both will be back on Friday. It's either going to be just me tomorrow, no show tomorrow, and both of us on Friday. So stay tuned, but I'm going to try. We're going to try our best here to get another episode out for tomorrow. So back to obviously this 2-1 victory over the Pittsburgh Penguins. Tyler Mott, we talked about a little bit before the break there. I think it's just so clearly what his role is, and he's just such a good forechecker, which I think is pretty obviously what makes him such a good penalty killer. But just has a long stick, man. Like it feels like, especially when they are in the Wings are in their own zone, when they're in the defensive zone, he just seems to get his stick on every puck, and it's really impressive. And I think that showed itself in this game again. Had quite a few pass deflections and whatnot, especially late when Pittsburgh was completely just going 6-on-4 and was in our zone and was getting opportunity and almost tied it to send it into overtime. He was out there for the start of that sequence, at least, if not a little bit longer, and broke up a couple of passes there as well. So getting to some of the goal scorers in this game, man, Amadeus Lombardi had a disgusting top shelf where mama keeps the peanut butter goal. It was nasty. And I think one of the more interesting conversations around Lombardi right now is he leads the team in games played. He has played all but one, and he literally can't be in two places at the same time. So he has played in every calendar day that the Wings have played, but literally can't be in Buffalo and Detroit at the same time. And that's obviously they had the split squad game on Monday. So he's played every day, and I think that is somewhat telling. It's not telling that he's going to make the roster. That is not going to happen, but I do think that it's somewhat telling just for the coaching staff, right? Continuing to put him in situations where not only is he playing, but he's getting a lot of playing time. In this game, he had I think more minutes than he did in the previous one. And yeah, his goal was disgusting. A lot of really good stick and puck handling there at work. And then, yeah, he just goes top shelf over the shoulder there over Yari. So I thought that he looked really good. And that's, again, we continue to say his name because he keeps doing notable things. I still think there's a lot of work defensively, but as we said on yesterday's show and at the end of last week, like this is a guy that has improved his skating, continues to get bigger, and looks like a real offensive weapon. My biggest thing with Lombardi is I'm just so excited to see him in GR this year, right? Because presumably he's going to have a much bigger role in GR this year than he did after the call-up last year. So I'm just really excited for him to get as many minutes as possible down there and to really see what he does with that opportunity. But really, really nice goal, really slick goal in this game. Let's talk Nate the Great. Nate Danielson looked phenomenal. I think there's a legitimate argument he looked like the best Red Wing player on the ice in this game. I'm not going to say the best player on the ice because he did share a barn with Sidney Crosby in this game, but I thought he looked phenomenal, man. And his goal was also nasty. Got off the bench just behind everybody on Pittsburgh and fought his way to the net, went kind of 5-hole. I think he went under pad technically, but kept the puck. Didn't lift the puck at all, didn't need to, found the back of the net. It was an absolute beauty. So I was really impressed with him, not only the goal, but really it felt like every shift. He was just so noticeable. Like just out there. He looks so calm and confident and collected. I cannot get over how good I think he has looked so far in the preseason and obviously, again, in this hockey game. And I think that conversation is going to get louder and louder, man, from all of y'all, from the rest of the fan base, from Brian and I really think the conversation about, is there a chance this dude makes the roster? I still think no. I'm still not trying to get ahead of myself. I think if the season started tomorrow, that he would still find himself in Grand Rapids. I think they want to make sure he's truly, where they want him to be development wise. And I'm not sure they're going to know that for sure in preseason, even if he does look good against other NHL competition. But man, I've just been so impressed with the skate. He's such a strong skater, and he goes into the corners, he fights for the puck, and obviously we talked a lot about the fact that veterans and fringe players treat preseason a lot differently. I understand that, but no matter who he is on a line with from the Wings perspective, not even looking at his competition, no matter who he's on a line with, it just looks like he's always buzzing and just looks so much better than everybody else. So I have been unbelievably impressed with him. Had one, oh my goodness, it would have been, it would have been all over if the pass landed. But he had one, I think it was the end of the second or start of the third period, where so has the puck on his stick, is going toward the net, peels off to the circle and spins. And as he spins, tries to hit the trail skater, who I think was Cross Hannes, but I don't quote me on that, and just barely out of reach behind him, just trailed a little bit too hard to the trail guy there. But if that would have landed, it would have been Hannes. I think it was Hannes, wide open in front of the net with both defenders biting on Danielson because they felt like they needed to, right? Like I can't say enough good things about how he's looked, and I think there's a legitimate case here for him. Roster conversations are going to get louder and louder, especially if he proves in the preseason that he can play wing. It's going to get really, really loud. He was in the faceoff circle a decent amount tonight as well. Just all around really good hockey game. At one point, speaking of Danielson, he was on a line. They did a little bit of lineup blending at one point, but there was a moment in a decent amount of this game where it was MBN, Elmer, and Danielson were on the ice together. And I don't remember who the defensive pair was in that. I think it was Wallinder maybe. But it was wild to watch. You had the biggest forward I've ever seen in my life. You had a guy who just is in his draft year and also is huge. Like you don't even, it's weird. Usually when people stand near Elmer, you're like, wow, like I'm only noticing Soderblom because he's massive. This was a funny instance where MBN getting near and sharing the ice with Elmer almost made me had the opposite effect and made me realize how big MBN is. And so seeing them share, even if it was only for a little bit, seeing them on the ice together was really fascinating because Danielson, we already talked about, looked great. NBN, I thought looked pretty solid. He got knocked off his skates a couple of times, but he's a big body. I think that'll just come with adjustment to NHL style of play and NHL ice and whatnot. Elmer, I don't know. I honestly, I was kind of frustrated with Elmer. It's just, man, it's one of those things where like the raw talent is just, and the intangibles are so there, and you want it to work so bad. And I still have hope and faith that it will. But man, he got the puck knocked off his stick. It felt like every time it touched his stick in this game. Had a tough time clearing at the end of the game as well, which cost the Wings a couple of opportunities and obviously time at the end of the game there. And he had some good moments too. We had a couple of really good pokes and whatnot, but it's almost like with Elmer, he can't afford to be an aggressive forecheck guy because if he swings and misses, if he goes for a forecheck and it ends up not working, he's just not going to be able to get back in time to cover up the miss there. So now he also is huge, so he has the ability, he has the reach, he has the stick length, right, to be able to kind of lay back a little bit more, which I think is why he was out there for a decent amount of that final push that Pittsburgh had, and with the 6-on-4, he was out there for I think half a shift at one point. So like there was some good to take out of it, and you do still see the good. It's just it's not NHL ready yet. That's all. And there's still a long way to go. And he's still very young, and he was a late draft pick, and it's really house money at this point. I love Elmer. It's just there's still, I think, a long way to go until he's like a solidified NHL talent. So we'll end on that. We'll end this segment on that. I do want to bring up NBN one more time here. I got a little bit off track there, and then we will get into some players on the blue line as well as some other notable performers in this hockey game. We will do all of that right after this. Got to talk to you all today about our friends over at FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place all of your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, everybody, welcome back here to the third and final segment of Locked On Red Wings. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every day. So MBN, just want to put a bow on that conversation. I was really impressed with actually his defense in this game. Again, he got kind of knocked off the puck a little bit on offense, but had a couple of really nice plays defensively, had a good forecheck at one point. Found the puck a few times, had a few nice pokes, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons on draft night. We were told that why the Wings liked him so much is he's a good two-way player, right? And so we've now seen a goal, and then we've seen a performance like this where it's a little bit more defensive oriented and didn't do much offensively. I'm always interested, as we all are, in the new first round pick and how he's going to look on a night-to-night basis. One of the takeaways I had from this game, we haven't really talked about the blue line too terribly much. The defense as a whole was kind of porous. We talked about at the beginning of the game how they were on their back heels and on the penalty kill a lot. That's never going to help. And then at the end of the game, there was a 6-on-4. So you had start and end, a lot of shots given up. The middle wasn't as bad as that final shot total will look, just because of how aggressive and how many volume shots they faced at the beginning and end of the game. But it still wasn't very good. I'm not here to tell you that they were clamps there in the middle 40 minutes of the game or anything like that. It was still pretty rough. And I think a lot of that, not only just the effects of playing 15-year NHL veterans with guys that have never played in the NHL before, that's obviously going to be a part of it. But this blue line, I continue to harp on, man, I think is a really interesting conversation. And like Justin Hull, I think led the team in ice time in this game, which is good. Like that's what preseason's for. We need to see what we have in all of these guys. And the Justin Hull conversation is just still so odd to me. Until we get to opening night and I physically see 3 goalies, 8 defensemen, and 12 forwards on the bench in front of Newsy, I'm having a really hard time believing that is actually in the best interest of the Detroit Red Wings. Like I am so blown away by this and so hyper fixated on the way this roster is constructed rather. And obviously, when you start having the conversation about, well, we have 8 defensemen, who would you get rid of? Everybody's first answer is Justin Hull. And so, I didn't think he looked terrible in this game, but like he didn't, I didn't watch him and I was like, oh, wow, like he's figured it out. We're back. He should be, the third pair D-man or whatnot. My opinion is the exact same, lukewarm. So like, I don't know what to make of. I don't know what to make of the future, and I mean immediate future of the blue line. I don't know what to make of how this is going to shake out over the next 2 weeks. I just continue to have a really hard time believing that Hull is long for this roster, but they're paying him a decent amount. They can't waive or send down Johansson. Like you just kind of are where you are. So again, we've had this conversation a lot. We can move on, but just a really, really odd roster constructed. And yeah, he led the team in ice time because they're trying to figure out if he's going to play going forward or if he's going to ride the pine, if he's going to be the 7th or 8th D-man is basically what they're trying to find out there. And he is in competition, I guess you could say, for 7th or 8th D-man with Albert Johansson, who I thought looked pretty solid. He had a lot of shots in this game. I think he ended with 4, maybe even 5, somewhere around there. Shots on net in this one. I thought it was pretty nice to see him get involved on the offensive side of the puck, actually. But yeah, I thought he looked pretty solid. It's really tough with preseason for, I mean, like Hall, I guess, in the same conversation. Like it's really tough, especially when you bring out the blender later in game, which they didn't do as much with the defense, I guess, to be fair. But like your partner matters so much. So like, when Johansson is in the regular season, if he's playing alongside a guy who's a lock on the roster and who we feel much better about than Hall or Tuomisto or like somebody like that who played in this game, I think it might look different. But I had no issues with what I saw from him in this one. Shout out to Austin Watson, who was an absolute hit machine in this game. I think he ended with 12 hits. Like you just watched and you were like, who is this guy that is just laying out the body every single opportunity he gets? Really aggressive forecheck there in the third period at the beginning of the third when he was on the ice too. Nice to see. And as a whole, the Wings had, I think, double the hits that Pittsburgh had. So good physical brand of hockey the Wings were preaching. The young Wings, the Griffins plus the bottom end of the Wings there were preaching in this game. But I think that's good. And part of that, again, as we talked about yesterday, to be fair to both sides here, like part of that is just NHL veterans playing against, AHL guys that are trying to make a roster. You're going to get a lot more fight in one of those in the preseason than the other. We talk all the time about the most important thing that these veterans can do is just get out of every game healthy. That's true for other teams as well, and it's important to remember that. But yeah, I thought that it was nice to see them just play that physical brand and be a little chippy and a little scrappy. So that's pretty much all I got for this game. Like I said, I mean, the ice was kind of tilted in Pittsburgh's favor there at the beginning and the end. But they Ville Husso was on his head, had a fantastic performance, and you saw the prospects scoring goals, man. Really fun to see Lombardi and Danielson getting the 2 goals for the Wings. That's always really cool. So we'll continue these conversations, obviously, as we get closer and closer to opening night. Who's going to make the roster? I think there's probably a cut due soon. But they do have an off day on Wednesday, the Wings do. So I guess there's a chance that that's a decent cut day, maybe 10 or 15 guys, maybe, I don't know, 7 to 15 guys. I'll put it that way. We could see, or they could wait until, this weekend as well. We'll see. Another thing that I didn't mention yesterday, and I had a couple people point out, which was a very fair criticism, is that Marco Kaspers looked really good in the preseason and looked really, really solid in the game he played on Monday night. I had his name written down on my show sheet and whatnot, must have just like glossed over it or came back from a break and skipped it or something. But he's looked phenomenal. And he's kind of, you can clump him in the same group with Danielson, right? Like Kasper has looked really good in a lot of the preseason so far. He didn't play in this game. That's why I'm kind of slapping this on to the end of the show. He didn't play on Tuesday night, but he's looked really good. And man, even if they don't make the roster, the more difficult those conversations are, the better and healthier the organization is, right? Anytime your top prospects are like fans are getting pissed off because top prospects aren't making the team on opening night is a good sign. You're doing something right. You have some really good players on your hands, and the depth of your organization is improving. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, he's looked really good on both sides of the ice too. Kasper did. I did not mention that, and that's completely my fault. So I think that's it. Thanks for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, I think, be back tomorrow. We'll see. 50-50 right now, up in the air. If I am not, it's either going to be me by myself or Brian and I on Friday. So whichever one of those happens, one of those definitely will. That was definitely an English sentence. Appreciate y'all. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. Same time, same place, your team, we ball every day. Doing a lot of outros there. See you tomorrow. Peace.